You're listening to The Power of V, a discussion on women's equality brought to you by Via Innovations in collaboration with Casually Baked. Hello, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
So good to see so many beautiful faces today to talk about women's equality.
I hope
to see you
they're
there,
also
Joe.
smart.
Well, to set the stage, I would like everyone to just give their elevator pitch, that brief introduction, and tell us what you're most excited to talk about today. Monica, let's start with you.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. Monica Villalpando here, founder and CEO of Via Innovations, where we specialize in boutique and customized product development in the cannabis space and expanding to other plant-based medicines. And I am most excited to talk about the female or lack of female consideration in product development, and specifically some concerns I have around some of the sexual wellness products that are coming out into the market in the cannabis space.
Oh, that's going to be a good one. Linda, let's go to you.
Sure. My name is Linda Klumpers. I am a clinical pharmacologist. I have a PhD in clinical pharmacology of cannabinoids. I've been studying THC since 2006, and what I'm doing now is two things. I am the co-founder and a partner with Verdient Science, that is an R&D consulting partnership mainly focused on cannabinoid pharmacology. And I also am the founder of Canify, that is a research and education organization. And we have developed a pharmacological questionnaire for patient, product, and science matching. And what I'm excited about for today is actually various things. So firstly, I'm very passionate about personalized medicine. So sex is a very important part of that as well. And something else is very general in the cannabis industry is that there are so many people with opinions, and there are a lot of fake facts out there too, and I'd like to address those.
Yes, debating facts seems to be something that happens a lot these days. Callie, what about you?
Well, my name's Callie Seaman. I'm a founder of a company called Aqua Laboratories, a hydroponic nutrient solution company. We also do research with a number of different licensed cultivators around the world on looking at increasing secondary metabolites within cannabis and tailoring them towards particular conditions. What am I most excited about speaking today? Speaking about women's how women have actually struggled in order to start businesses, how they've actually got into the business as well, and looking how the cannabis industry is very different to any other industry out there.
Yes, that's going to be good too. Jess, last but not least.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's so nice to see some familiar faces as well. I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm doing my PhD at Oxford in a degree called Socio-Legal Studies. Been researching the legal cannabis market for about 5 years now, and currently I'm looking at the process of policymaking through the lens of cannabis legalization and commercialization. And I'm an anthropologist, so my data collection and fieldwork brought me into the industry inside and out, learning about it. And then I started a women's empowerment network, co-founded that with someone called Jasmine Thomas, who runs a CBD skincare company called Ohana. And we started Entourage to create a space for women to come together and explore and engage the industry here in Europe. And then on the side, I also do some consultancy through something that I founded called the Global C. And that was really a way to bridge the academic side of what I was doing and the practice of what's happening in the industry. And I would say I'm most excited today to kind of dive into some of the misconceptions that people have already mentioned, the reality of what is happening for female entrepreneurs in the space, and then kind of the hype that goes around all of this and breaking through some of the hype and really digging into what is happening on the ground.
Nice. I love it. The humanity and the collaboration with the cannabis. This is going to be so good. I am your collaborator and collaborator. I am your moderator, and I'm the host of Casually Baked, the podcast. I'm also a cannabis lifestyle guide. I've been working in the cannabis space for 5 years. So, in my role with you ladies today, I want to kind of be the voice of that ultimate consumer. So, as y'all are talking about things, I might pipe in with little tidbits here and there. But I will say the power of V is strong with this group.
I have to add it, so in case the rest of the group doesn't know, Joanna is the reason I am even in the cannabis space. So she really is planted the seed here, and I met Jessica and Jasmine through Entourage in the UK. So I love how it's just coming back full circle and bringing in a little bit more across the pond. So thank you all,
Yes.
ladies, for joining too.
You know, we have this Women's Equality Day. And, I want to roll my eyes at that and like, okay, we need every day to be Women's Equality Day. So for the next hour, the six of us are going to discuss, well, now there's 5 today because we had one had to drop out. So we want to talk about ideas, not for leveling the playing field, but for elevating everyone's experience. I feel like so many times it's like women's equality. We're not trying to challenge men in this industry, but we do want to elevate the industry, elevate the conversation. So, since we have a Zoom room full of scientists, let's dive into this cannabis-infused discussion by answering this question. Why can't lubricants and topicals be created equal? Dr. V, do you want to start?
Well, yeah, clearly that was like Bernie. I'm dying to answer this. Well, as a product formulator, and if I'm looking at safety, the route of administration plays a huge role in that. Your lungs, for example, are very susceptible to exposure, so there's not so much of a defense mechanism. Versus if you swallow something, you have your GI tract that will help break apart and metabolize. And Linda will talk a lot more about that too. But then on the lubricant side, which is applied internally, it's extremely absorbent. So if you were to apply the lubricant on the top of your skin, most likely it's not going to penetrate past the stratum corneum. Definitely, it's not designed to do that. If it goes vaginally inserted, then it just sucks that right up. And there's the safety considerations around the excipients and the testing, it just doesn't exist. Moreover, I'm seeing a lot of products, well, just in general in the cannabis space, because it's all natural, it's safe, and that's definitely not the case. And we learned that vitamin E is natural and we shouldn't inhale it. So the same things applies to other routes of administration, and that's a big one for me, that it falls all under the same safety and regulatory considerations.
Linda, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, not much. She is right. So with a lubricant, I assume you're talking about the vaginal administration route. With a topical, topical means local. You can apply it locally. Mostly that is happening on the skin. Can be in the vagina. And just as and of course the skin is very different from the mucosal membrane in the vagina. And I think I'm not 100% sure who is listening in right now, but I think it's very, very important what Monica just mentioned, to distinguish between topical and transdermal. So topical means that something is acting locally. It might get into the stratum corneum, but that skin layer is pretty good at keeping stuff out. So THC will not get just in there very easily. And transdermal means through the skin. So that means it goes deeper into the skin. It will get into the systemic circulation, so it'll get in your blood. It will get transported all over the place. And so actually transdermal is more comparable to oral and inhalation because it gets everywhere, and topical just stays in one place. And if you look at preclinical trials, that means studies that were done in animals, mostly cute rodents, then I think they're cute. You will see that that it will actually treat local disorders. There are also endocannabinoid receptors in your skin. So those are the binding places of your physiological system to which cannabinoids respond. That has never been shown in humans, but it's important to realize the difference between something that gets through that skin barrier in your body and something that stays on skin. And the reason why I'm also mentioning this is sometimes you see these claims of products, also vaginal products, and they say it will get fully absorbed, meaning it will get everywhere in your body, and it will not make you high. And then we're talking about 60 milligrams of THC. So something at 60 milligrams of THC goes through your whole body and doesn't make you high, should make you very,
Weird.
mm-hmm. Yes.
So then how do we go about, getting this sort of categorization separated? Jess, in your studies right now with the policy making, what is the best route for people that are really wanting to see action in something like this? Where do we go?
I think it's quite a complicated question and depends on the jurisdiction that we'd be focusing on, because I know Monica's in the US. Linda, I'm not sure where you're based at the moment. Kelly and I are in the UK. And we're at different quote unquote stages of legalization. What I have personally done is looked at how the corporate or the commercial side has influenced the policy. And I've been having interesting conversations about how the consumers also have a influence on that. And we can talk about conscious consumerism and how people are demanding a quote unquote slave-free cannabis supply chain and products that would come under that realm as well. And so on the consumer side, if they begin to demand products and they're looking for lubricants versus topicals and kind of specific instructions that come along, or that the bud tenders in the US maybe are telling them about that, then that would come from the consumer side. But on the other hand, you can see that the regulators, if they actually implement policies, it kind of has to work in this triangulation of a process, I suppose. And so I think it really requires education, which I think we would all agree that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So education is first and foremost. But also I think a lot of the responsibilities fall on the companies themselves. And we can talk about cannabis being an industry that is setting the stage and setting a precedence for industries to come. And I think if that really is the case, then these new categorizations of consumer good products is a really great way to kind of set that precedence now. But I don't think they could do it alone. I think they need to be working alongside research scientists, different product formulators. They need to be working with throughout the entire supply chain. That'd be my one take on this.
Well, and I know there's so many body and beauty brands that are jumping on board. And so, big companies that have a big budget, big pocketbooks, should, really feel the pressure to be doing some of these studies, doing some clinical trials and helping, push this narrative. Is there anything else we want to talk about lubricants?
I think we've not mentioned the smell. I mean, many of the actual products that you actually get that are cannabis-based are not got the best smells in the world. And when you're getting a bit jiggy with it, the last thing you want is something that doesn't smell good. It can put off. Some of these topicals and some of them, there's just, I think, I'm not putting that near my vagina. He's going to be 3 miles if he tries smells like that. So, there's the elephant in the room here, and smell is everything. It can completely change your mood. As I said, I've smelt some of the topicals that are for skin, and you put them on, and 3 hours later, you still go, oh, I'm never using that again. So that should be something I'd want to sort of add in there about we really need to think about everything about the product, not just down to, it's the use of it and it actually getting into the body. It's the actual texture of it, is it right for that moment as well? Applying a skin cream, you're not really thinking much about them rubbing it in. You're a little bit more busy when you've got a lubricant in your hands.
That's right. It needs to smell good and taste good.
I mean, also on the lubricant side, I remember one of the first times when I went back home to Colorado, and we were at the dispensary getting some products, and then they didn't tell us this, but it was like, don't wear a condom, or if you're wearing condoms, be careful because it might break. And when and if consumers are wearing condoms and the condom breaks because of the lubricant due to the oil and the friction and what's happening throughout whatever's going on in the bedroom, then the consumers need to know, because that's really big risk, especially if the woman, if there's no other form of contraception, basically. And then also to the other side of STIs, and that needs to be a conversation about sexual health and women's health and things like that. And so I don't know if that education is that widespread, but it's very, very important.
Yeah, you raise a good point, Jess, because most of the formulations are oil-based. It's extremely hard to make cannabinoids water compatible in the formulation and stable, so that the oils will deteriorate the condom. So that is, yeah, that's definitely something that's not as readily advertised. And I do want to also note, in some of the research of non-cannabis containing lubricants, there's a lot of ingredients that are very harmful for the mucosa of the women and actually cause more damage by adding to the infection of the micro tears from intercourse and promoting yeast infections, even in some cases too. So even outside of the cannabis space, there's a lot of work to do in that regard. And this is from very established peer-reviewed studies where they're saying this is bad for women, but yet I'm still seeing these ingredients on the shelves.
You know, let's put a pin in this and perhaps do a full-blown episode on Casually Baked, the podcast, because there is a lot to talk about here. But let's now shift gears into the differences between men and women when it comes to cannabis, because, you know, Monica, I know that we've talked about testing before and how these, processes are mostly built around men. And here we've been spending, 15 minutes talking about lubricants for women. So, let's talk about that now.
Well, I think, throughout the product development process, as a product formulator and a clinical pharmacologist, pharmacokinetic sciences, we work very closely together. So that's why Linda and I often collaborate. And so where I, in my background in pharma, where I played in as the pharmaceutics space, and that supports preclinical. So as Linda mentioned before, humans, all the way through clinical. And with that, there's always assumptions that are made. And oftentimes these assumptions are based on male animal models, which then gets trickled in along the pathway. And what we're learning is that, these different therapeutic areas affect men and women a lot differently. So our approach to targeting the specific indication may not be applicable for women. Most recently, we discovered this at Via Innovations when we were doing some research around hair growth and the alopecia, which affects both men and women. We do know that hair loss is primarily due to DHT, which is dihydroxytestosterone. So it's obviously a lot more prevalent in men than in women. And a lot of these products go towards that estrogen. And it's not very effective with women because we have so low levels of DHT. And so female pattern hair baldness is really not understood because we just haven't bothered to study it.
That is so interesting. All right, scientists, speak up. So, okay. Yeah, so the ECS differences, can you tell us a little bit about that maybe, or, how the product differentiation might be better? I'm not exactly sure the best next angle to dive into that.
Yeah, I can maybe comment on what Monica said and also your question. So you asked about endocannabinoid system differences, but I think that all these physiological systems in your body, they all collaborate and they all respond to each other. And sometimes you can also look for the differences outside of the endocannabinoid system, but it's still influencing the endocannabinoid system or the products that you are taking that are often phytocannabinoids. So these are cannabinoids produced by the plants and not by your body. And just to give, just like Monica, to give an example from my own experience, I was once, and this is maybe funny to mention because we're talking about many studies being done in men. The reason why this has been done traditionally, and when you do a new compound inside a human for the very first time, we call it a first in human, you typically want healthy men because they will renew their semen every 2 months, so their reproduction is not in danger. For women, that is different. So women who are still in their reproductive phase, you don't want to give them anything new because you don't know how you're going to affect the reproduction of the woman. So it's just for their own protection that they're typically being excluded in very early phases from drug studies. A recent review from, I think it was 2 years ago, on how many men and how many women are being included in clinical trials in general, found that nowadays, luckily, the numbers are equal. So that is good. It's not saying that the development of drugs for women is also equal, but at least the inclusion in studies is more comparable. So that's good news. But then, Linda Klumpers, 10 years ago, I wanted to do a study on pharmaco-fMRI. So I wanted to know if you give THC to an individual, what are you seeing in the brain if they are doing nothing inside the scanner? So to get your study approved, if you do that in humans, before you go to the institutional review board, you go to the scientific advisory board of your institution. And I did that and I said, in my study, I want to include 12 people, 6 men and 6 women. And then one of these older guys asked me, why do you want to include women? I said, well, because I think they're 50% of our society. And then after a short pause, they approved it. Just happy. It was pretty interesting. But then I included these women and they dropped out one after another. So I had to replace them. It was really hard. These women got so high and they started getting anxious inside an MRI scanner. So you shouldn't be claustrophobic. And then with THC being high in a scanner, they started getting anxious. They started vomiting. It was quite a disaster. And the person operating the MRI machine told me, like, I think we should not do this anymore. But I continued. And I was not aiming for this because I really wanted to understand what's going on in those brains. So I did not power for means like set up the study in a way that you can really look at, is there a difference between men and women? Because I clearly saw there was something going on. So then after the study was done, we looked at the blood concentrations of these women and we saw that they, and you know, this is not a proof because we had not enough subjects, but these women that dropped out all had way higher active hydroxy metabolites of THC. So, and this has to do not necessarily with a difference in their endocannabinoid system, but they might metabolize THC differently. And that's very important. I wish I can show my screen, but there is this study from the 1970s in which 1 milligram of THC was given 1 milligram of 11-hydroxy THC intravenously in subjects, and you see that the people with 11-hydroxy get way more high than the people with THC. This is very potent stuff. If you look at the effects of THC, always look at what 11-hydroxy does, but there might be these type of differences. So I thought maybe that's nice to mention. But about the study design itself, indeed, Monica brought up that point earlier. You also need to be aware that how you set up your studies, it can be different for men and for women. In pain studies, this is a very famous example. If you do a study, you have a research assistant who does all the measures with the subject. And if you do a pain study, it's very important for consistent effect that the sex of the research assistant is also consistent. Because if you put men or a woman with an opposite sex, they will give a different pain response consistently than if you put them with the same sex. Yeah.
Psychology, so fascinating. Wow. So, okay, let's shift gears and talk about now the hazards of being a woman in business, period. So we've got products that are, more geared to men. I feel like we all work in a business that, we try to say women, there's a bigger female presence in the cannabis industry, but in general, women, we are like the poster child of perseverance, like pushing the giant rock up the hill. Actually, we've got two. We got a boulder in each hand. So, Callie, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any specific interesting insight to share?
Well, lack of people wanting to take you seriously and thinking you're just a little girl. That one has been a lot of over the years, other business owners. I mean, I'm lucky enough with the people I work with. They've always respected me and treated me as an equal. But definitely from other businesses, the older generation I found would be, oh, you go make a cup of tea then, love, for us all. And you said, well, no, actually, I'm the doctor here. I'm the brains behind this operation. I think you might need me in the room. That's happened. And the expectation that you're the one who takes the notes. You take the notes. Well, I'm not going to write the notes with my vagina. So, why am I taking the notes? Can't you? Are your fingers open? I mean, I'm all about celebrating the differences between men and women. And we've got fantastic skills in ourselves. But there are times when those stereotypes that you're the secretary, you're going to be the one who's answering the phone, making the cups of tea. I say I'm lucky with the people I work with, really, really lucky. They've always treated me as an equal. I mean, in the past, in other companies I've worked in, there's been pay disparities. I've had people doing exactly the same role as me, paid nearly twice as much as I'm being paid. So I'm seeing that a lot. But I found academia, when I was doing my PhD, there was less disparity there. And I think there was a lot more because it was about, they had a HR department. It wasn't such small companies. So there already seems this to be in place, the need to be PC, the need to make sure that there's a quality being there. So I've seen the difference between industry and academia, and I found academia a lot easier. And there was a lot less, equality was a given there. It wasn't even really spoke about with it. Whereas in business, being an only female on a male-dominated board, you kind of have to behave in a different manner as well. I always feel that I'm compensating constantly to make up for not being a man. I shouldn't feel like that, but I should look at the qualities that I bring to the table, the feminine side of things, rather than always wanting to try and be one of the boys. And we kind of need to get away from that a little bit, I think.
Yes. There is an art to getting a seat at the table, and then there's an art to keeping it and having your voice heard. So, maybe Jess, maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo also what Callie said, because that's my current experience. My center, I think, is predominantly women. There's about 30 of us, and I think there might be 10 men, something like that. And so I've gone from being in a center, it's the faculty of law. Maybe there's another gender imbalance for lawyers in real life. I'm not sure, but I've gone from that into the industry where a handful of women that I can literally count on my hands. Callie, and when Monica's in town, it's like, I know those are the two familiar faces, and there's a few others I can mention, and then that's about it. And then I do some work at the UN and the WHO. And when I got to the UN, I was like, this is the most refreshing place in the world. There's people from all over the world. Gender equality is better than it's ever been. This is like what we should all reach for. And then I was like, oh, but it's the UN. It's part of their SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. They have to do that. So yeah, the industry, I know there's quotes and stats about it's better than every other industry, but it's still not the best. In terms of having a seat at the table, having your voice, I think one of the things I have found personally in some of the events with Entourage that come out in feedback is that there's a lack of confidence. And it varies from lack of confidence in terms of genuinely knowing the right terms, the jargon, how do you interact with investors in the right way? Are they going to like flinch when I say the word vagina? How do you interact in a situation like that? But then also lack of confidence because for so many years they've been socialized to think there is this gender imbalance and there is a social hierarchy. And so it's kind of ingrained. And I think confidence is one thing that if you can just walk into a room, look them in the eye and say, like, I'm here for XYZ reason. This is how it's going to go down. Demand your value, show up, be respectful, have that acceptance, the tolerance that goes back and forth. I think that's one of the first ways that you can overcome it. And that's definitely how you show that you deserve your seat at the table and how you can maintain your seat at the table as well.
Just to add to that, I've noticed with the 20 years of being in the hydro industry, how it's changed, how the new generation there is a lot less, the quality is far easier. You don't really need to actually mention it. I found the problem I've had has been with older generation, those the 50 plus, those that I would call my dad's generation, who then treat you very differently. And I'm finding it's changing. It's massively changing. I don't know if you other ladies have found that as well, that as things are progressing and, you know, you've got this new generation, we're teaching the new generation that's coming through that women are as good, if not better, at certain things, that you're not having to fight for your voice. You're automatically being listened to.
I would like to respond to that if that's possible. Because I've had the situation too with older generation, but also with younger. So just an example of an older generation thing is that I was at a conference, and then there was a man, I'll not say who it is, and he wanted to introduce me to a group of other men, and I said, sure, let's do that. And we went there, and then he said, she's not only very beautiful, she's also intelligent. And I thought, I don't think that's a common introduction if I would have been a man. And then I said, well, I just looked for a second to see if anyone would say something, and nobody did. So I just made a joke about it. I said, well, I'm not as beautiful as you are. And actually, he is not at all. But that doesn't matter. It was just, I thought, yeah, it's not really nice. But something else about the younger generation that is was not intended as any test or whatsoever. I went to a recruitment fair, and I had a booth there with Canify. So, and then a friend of mine came over. He's 10 years older than I am, and he said, Linda, I'm gonna help you here. This is gonna be fun. So he took one side of the table. I took the other side of the table. I was in the pathway, so very well visible. Everyone could see me. And at some point, it was very busy at the booth. At some point, I noticed that there was a queue for him ending up, and nobody was coming to me. And I thought, I don't think I'm that scary. I'm the owner of the company. This is my friend helping out. What's happening here? And then later I realized, and he also noticed, he said, yeah, I just sent everyone to you. But yeah, people were going to him because they thought that he was the CEO of the company. Just a small thing.
Wow. Yeah. That sounds
typical. I've felt it equally between academia and industry and across all ages. And I mean, not to really, we could sit here, I'm sure we could talk about a bunch of stories that have happened, but my point that I want to make is, when I look back at the situations, I regret not being more vocal about it. I think, Linda, you made a joke, you added to, but definitely when I was starting out, and especially in the cannabis industry, I was a bit more shy and quiet and not wanting to be too, rock the boat, let's say. And I think a great example is Joanna. And I mean, last year, you and I were at New West Summit, and I was groped twice by two different guys. And one of the guys that we were with saw the guy do it as he was walking by. He's like, do you want me to kick his ass? Or like, what do you want? And I was like, no, it's okay. And I was like, what the fuck? Oops, I don't know if I can say that, but I was so mad at myself. Because I was like, now that I just allowed him, I give him a pass to do it again, or I gave him a pass to do it to someone else. And I think that's the point. So it's not going to stop. We're going to encounter these other stories. We can keep on talking about it. I think the difference to stop the train is to like stand up for ourselves a little bit more. And that's one thing I've learned. And that applies to just this, like maybe some sexual passes, but also to your point, Jess, sitting in the boardroom. Like I've had older generations talk to me like I'm a piece of garbage. And I've told them to go, F off. And I didn't want to because there's beautiful big accounts, but I will not work with somebody who speaks to me like that.
I agree. And I have, I've been in the room with the VCs and, there's a crowd of 3 or 4 men around me, but the whole time I'm like, are they interested in me? Or are they interested in my business?
Yes.
And so I feel like women have another layer of discovery that they have to go through before they discover if someone is genuinely interested in their business model, their product, or their services. So
that's so true. I just don't want to do sales myself anymore because I've had one time that I wanted to hand it over to my male colleague and then they were not interested anymore in the product.
Mm-hmm. And I would have men in the industry that we exchange information and then I get a phone call at 9 or 9:30 at night. And so the immediate response for me has now become, what is your intention with me? And then just be quiet, see what happens. Because, I had one that said, well, honestly, I mean, I'm more personally interested. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not. Glad we could clear that up, So I think it really is, ladies, taking their proverbial balls and saying, exactly what they think and being, kind of stoic about it.
I think this, sort of adding to that is why there's a culture in this country called the ladette culture. So that you will behave like a bloke, you can prove that you can drink more than them, you can shout louder, and you become more and more aggressive in the manner. And in some ways that has actually helped me over the years. And as people have started to take me seriously because I have behaved like they have. And, I'm ashamed of that, of doing that, but it's got me and kept me at the table as opposed to being a little shrew and sort of going, oh no, I'm going to do that. And it's people have woke up and listened to me and not, I mean, I've been lucky enough, I've never been sexually harassed anywhere. I've never had any sort of such issues. But I've always kind of maintained this, I don't know, like aggressive kind of ladette persona that actually scares a lot of men. And I know I've scared a lot of men off before as well because they can't handle my right forthness and the way that I will speak quite openly and be quite open about my sexuality and things and be in that kind of way and open to that I actually masturbate as well. That will blow a man's mind completely. You talk about, oh, go on. Not one out, mate. You'll feel better for it. And did she just say that? Yeah. And that kind of as I don't know. It's done me well of being like that. And as I say, I know I have scared quite a few men, and they've sort of go, "Are we really going to work with her? She really just said that." Yeah.
But if I can add from a more like a business side of things on that, I think the assertiveness and the aggressiveness is sometimes very effective and it is good. So for example, I was at a women's only retreat for cannabis, and this was back in the US. And I remember like some of my observations were, it's very odd that there are no men here because no business is getting done. And it was like little groups that were just, it wasn't necessarily surface level conversation, but it was how women were getting to know each other. And I'm sure the business was happening like in later forms of the relationship and conversations. But I remember when I'd go to conferences, let's call it MJ Biz or Cannabis Europa, wherever you are in the world, the first 5 minutes of the networking event, it's, okay, this is business. Let's talk about the deal, da-da-da-da-da. And then I just felt very confused as to why I was at a women's retreat and nothing was happening along those lines. And of course, there was an aspect of wellness, business, education. There's so many more layers. But then I think my mom was with me too, and I remember I said to her, I think it would have been really interesting to see how the dynamic would have changed if there were as many women and then there were as many men, and where those conversations would lead and how that might change. And so, to your point, Kelly, I think sometimes being assertive and being aggressive in a conversation, aggressive not obviously in a violent way, but in a like, this is why we're here, we're doing business because we're here about an industry XYZ, whatever it is. I think that's really important. And yeah, there's this story that keeps playing back in my mind as well, as Monica was saying about being vocal. And this was at the beginning of my field work as well. I was in Canada at a conference, and Canada's legal. They're passing around a joint. Most people probably know when you smoke a joint, you pass around in a circle, egalitarian to the max. Passing around, comes to me, the guy literally crosses his arm over me, skips me entirely. And I was like, oh, excuse me, sorry, I'm not sure if I introduced myself, but hi, my name is Jessica Steinberg, and yeah, I would like to smoke that joint. And we're like, dude, it was like the guys, Monica, they're like, dude, did you not notice that she was there? God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I just want to make sure that when you are smoking, you are passing around to everyone equally. And just because I'm the only woman in the group, and yes, I'm a bit younger, and however else you want to categorize me, like blue eyes, curly hair, you name it, I probably fit that box now. Like, that's unacceptable. So again, my name is Jessica.
Well, speaking of passing it around equally, let's talk about fundraising for a minute. How many of you have had fundraising roadblocks because you're women?
I haven't, because all the rest of my team have been men. So I was
That's a good way to play it.
I was pulled under the wing of a group of men who were very they were all a bit business experienced, and I've learned so much from them. It's been absolutely fantastic. And as I say, the men I work with are brilliant, and I'm treated completely as an equal. But I've not experienced that, so I'm interested to hear what you ladies are actually experiencing. But in some ways, I do feel that I've not experienced that because I've got men and allow them to do it. And that, in some ways, I think I'm being a little bit lazy because I'm allowing them to do that.
You're being strategic.
I can maybe comment not from my own experience, because I decided back then not to go for the fundraising path. I wanted to build it up in a bootstrap way. However, I know some numbers, and this week actually a new report was presented in the Netherlands. So just to Jess, because she asked earlier, I don't know where you are. Right now I'm in Colorado, and when there's no coronavirus, I typically travel back and forth between Colorado and my home country, the Netherlands, a few times a year. So I then stay in two places. So in the Netherlands, a report was presented with data from 2008 to 2018, and then 2018 and 19 on the Dutch startup scene. That is relatively well studied there. And it was found that there is significantly lower, although it's increasing somewhat, but significantly lower chance that a female-owned startup will get funds. And if they get funds, it's lower. So if these companies get funds, the average money amount that women get during such a round is 200,000 euros. For men, it's 600,000 euros on average. So that's a crazy difference. From all the startups that got awarded money for the men and female group together. So if you co-found it with a man, 6% of it is for mixed founders, and 1 to 2% for female only. So there's a lot to be improved.
Good perspective. There's room for improvement.
Definitely.
One of the things Monica and I were passing back and forth when we were having a discussion about fundraising roadblocks is the opportunity for equity crowdfunding that seems to be a good alternative for women right now, because less than 2% of VC funds. Monica, was that the stat? Less than 2% went to women?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But then with this Regulation CF, which is officially Title III of the Jobs Act that went into play in May of 2016, there is an opportunity for private early stage companies to do the whole crowdfunding thing, but instead of, tchotchkes and subscriptions, people are getting, stock and investment in your company. So have any of y'all heard about it? Have y'all looked into it? I feel like it's a conversation that needs to be elevated among women so they can start dipping their toe into that.
So
I'm just,
yeah, no, go ahead, Monica.
no, please, Jess. I was just saying, I'm just now starting to dip my toe into it, and that's why we're having more of these discussions around. I just want to learn more of these stats, knowing what I'm faced up against, and also there are things that I'm passionate about that a man might not be able to relate to, such as the research on endometriosis, and that I want to raise money for. So there's obviously a little bit. I mean, the right investor will come, but it is, it's also connecting with that, finding that common connection, and that might be harder as a woman and fighting for women's or wanting to pursue women's health.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I haven't personally raised money for a company that I've started, but Jasmine, who started Ohana, who co-founded Entourage with me, she's gone through a fundraising process, and I do some work on her team as well. And so I was meeting with a few investors here in the UK, and it was actually one of the suggestions that an investor gave to us, and he came from consumer goods with a particular focus in beauty and skincare. So it was right up our alley, and he said, consider doing some crowdfunding. There's been really successful examples. He gave an example of an ice cream company that got completely funded. And it was like, you think who's going to compete against Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs and companies like that? But it's top shelves in some of the supermarkets nowadays. And that's how they got themselves off the ground. And he said it's a really great way to open up the market and even like test the market to see where that interest is and get some feedback. We didn't go down that route for various reasons, but I would say fundraising still has been a challenge. And from a cannabis perspective, one of the challenges as well is the hesitation to understand like what the company does, how does the science work, what is the legality. And I think maybe half, I'm not sure if I'm really exaggerating on that, but I feel like half our time is spent educating these investors, and you have to be willing to build the relationship with them, have multiple conversations, because spend time educating them, even if they're not going to make an investment in your company, but they might deploy capital to another female founded brand or to another brand in the CBD or cannabis space, whatever it is. And so, yeah, there's definitely different routes. We've been most successful, we meaning Ohana and Jasmine, with like family offices and angel investors, just because I think they're a bit more interested and willing to take that risk sometimes. But of course, it depends on the size of the company and how much they're raising, and if that investor wants to hop on board or not. But I do think crowdfunding has been quite successful for brands, not just in the cannabis space, but for some other sectors as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the benefits, about crowdfunding is that art of storytelling that you get to build into your ask. And so, bringing people along on that journey, it helps them to understand your vision and where you're trying to go. Sorry, Callie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, not at all. There's just adding on to about the actual getting funding for a cannabis company. Within the UK, I don't know what it's like in the US or the Netherlands, but I assume it's a lot easier, and there's a lot of people struggling to actually just get bank accounts here when starting a company that is a CBD based company that has, they're not actually plant touching in any shape or form, but they're actually being able to get a bank account as simple as that, even before getting the funding coming in, is also very difficult. I'm hearing as well within my industry that there's companies having their actual bank accounts shut down because they've got an association to cannabis as well. There's certain banks that are refusing to actually serve these companies and themselves, but be the male or female. But it's I think there's a struggle as well to actually people to take any cannabis company serious, full stop.
Yeah, I had that same issue trying to open a bank account for my CBD company. And yeah, it took me 9 months, the better part of 9 months, rejected by 11 or so banks. I mean, that's ridiculous. So we're running out of time. So I want to group this last section with, talking about women in leadership, women empowering women. There there is such power when women get together, but there can also be a giant mean girls club. So, how do you as leaders of your organization, you know, put your best foot forward, be that leader, teach women how we want to be represented in this industry, and teach men how we want to be represented?
Well, for me, number one, be yourself, be true to yourself. Because if you're not being true to yourself and giving that out, no one's going to take you seriously, because people can always tell when you're faking it. Oh, I've got to think a bit more about that one.
Well, and you can certainly, we can come back to you if you want to continue to form that thought. Monica, what do you think?
For me, I do my best to put out what I'm trying to attract. And as with the amazing group of women here, I'm very fortunate to have such a broad and diverse global crew of women. I have also experienced, I say mean girls in the industry or whatnot. And you're going to experience that anywhere you go. And you can either take that on and let it negatively impact you, or you can deflect it and strengthen it with your crew. That would be a big one for me. It's just that life is too short, at least this lifetime. It goes by quickly, and so it's important that you are a kind human, because that is more likely to come back in your direction. You stand your ground, and you listen to your intuition. Half the time, as I'm getting older, and I think about the times I have that little voice, or that little, this is kind of uncomfortable, I don't know, but like, oh no, it's great, it always is not great. And so that really, really, your inner voice, that gut feeling is so powerful, and that will help you maneuver which person, or let's say we're talking about mean girl or girls crew, which one you're going to slot into next, and which ones aren't for you, and that's fine. You can't make everyone happy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I would add that kind of find your girl gang or your guy gang, whoever is your circle that's holding their hands and constantly supporting you, whoever is going to say, I believe in you, I know that you can do this, your cheerleaders, your fans. I think it's important to have both men and women, and however else someone may identify as other genders, to have the support around you. We've experienced a lot of, from Entourage as an example, we've experienced a lot of collaboration over competition. And so, for example, people introducing each other to retailers, even though they'll be on the same shop floor together. And so I think being open, and to your point, Monica, about kindness, knowing that when you are open and kind, that it does come back to you. And I'm a firm believer that you can create opportunities in order to make possibilities. And in that way, that if you can create whatever you see as your passion, your ambition, and you have other people saying, I believe that you can do that, I really don't think that there's anything that's going to stop you. And if there is something that's going to stop you, it's probably your own mentality. So to have your little cheerleader, your girl gang, your guy gang, to have your own personal board of directors.
I like it. Linda?
Yeah, I like a lot of what the previous lady said. It's so important for people to do what they like. When I interview people for my team, they will ask what needs to be done, and I will ask them, what do you like to do? Because if you have people doing stuff they don't like, that it's not going to work. I think the team that I work with is super diverse in terms of background, in terms of where they come from, in terms of religion, everything. That's really fantastic. But of course, you also need some similarities. And the way I select people, I don't want them to be my copy. That's not going to help anyone. It's not going to be good for the business. But there is one thing that I value a lot and that I want everyone to have, and that is people who don't say yes, yes, yes the whole time, and who say, oh, this is great. No, people need to be very clear on what can be improved, what can be better. If they're not critical, I don't think there's a good match. If they are not allowed to, or do not feel free to talk with me about the things that are not going well, that's also not a good match. So I want people to be really open. They're not all that direct, so sometimes I need to really, really ask and get more information out. But that's okay, as long as they are critical about the process. That is super important. But that is within your own little pillar that you're working. What I think is super important is your network. And I'm not saying like, oh, go to every drink that is organized, etc. But I think if you have a certain set of values, it's really important to recognize that and to also see who is around you with a similar set of values. What are your motivations? Are your motivations to earn a lot of money, or are your motivations to do really cool science? And who are your friends in that? And I entered this cannabis industry in 2006, and I still have friends from that beginning period who are still in the industry. And you can always call if there's something going on. You can always call if there are questions. They can always call you if there's something. And I think that's really important to pick out who is, let's say, who do you trust, and to really cherish that.
Harmony with everything you ladies said. You know, the thing that I think we hear so much about women in business is that we're so emotional. You're so emotional. And so, you know, what I would encourage people to do is harness those emotions. Like, you know, don't let them show visibly on your face, but you feel your feelings and use them for your benefit, use them for your team, and just, you know, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, of course, you're going to get discouraged. You're going to want to quit 1,000 times. You're going to want to, you know, cut off all these people who've wronged you or whatever, but just don't quit. Keep your cool. You know, the calmest person in the room has the most power. So, you know, when you're in those situations, try really hard to be that person. Callie, was there any last thing you wanted to add?
I think all you ladies had summed it up, the network and finding people that you harmonize with. You don't necessarily have to have all the same interests, but you've got to learn to be able to communicate together well. And if you can't communicate well, you're never going to be able to go forwards. And as I say, you've all made really good points about you don't want somebody who's going, yes, yes, yes. And developing those networks as well. And the Entourage network is a fantastic one. It's absolutely, and it brings like-minded women together.
Yes, absolutely. So, ladies, thank you all for sharing your insights and for elevating the power of V. Equality, like we've mentioned today, isn't a competition. You know, men don't have to suffer for women to be equal. And I'm hopeful that today's discussion can be that memo for our male counterparts. And together we can elevate our industry and our collective experience. So,
Jenna,
to equality.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
The power of V. So the V stands for vrouw in my native tongue, Dutch, and that means woman. I don't think that was mentioned with the power of V. Is that via innovations and via Fondo?
Yeah, I love it even more now that it's
that. You know, and for me, you know, we talk, it is V via innovations. It's also V for vagina. It's V for women.
And someone pointed out, the girlfriend of Maddie, the girlfriend of Machine, said it kind of looks like, you know, a uterus too, the way it's shaped. And so it's a feminine thing. But actually, Linda, it was designed by a Belgian graphic designer. So one of my friends, so maybe subtly in there, but I love it.
Well, I love you all so much. I really appreciate the work that you're doing in the industry. And I think that this was a beautiful representation of female voices from around the world in celebration of Women's Equality Day. So cheers to us, ladies.
Thank you.
And to you.
much.
Thank you for joining us for The Power of V, a discussion on women's equality with Dr. Monica Villalpando, founder of VIA Innovations, Dr. Callie Seaman, co-founding director at Aqualabs Limited and Hempire Limited, Jessica Steinberg, managing director of the Global C and co-founder of the UK-based Entourage Network, and Dr. Linda Klumpers, founder of Canify and partner in Verdient Science, LLC. This conversation was produced in the Casually Baked studio in Oakland, California. Arnav Gupta was the recordist and editor for this program. I'm Joanna Newting, your host and cannabis lifestyle guide. If you learned something new, we hope you'll puff, pass it on. Thank you for listening.